Well, peeps, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another episode of your favourite podcast and mine. Welcome to the UK Wrestling Figure Podcast. Hope you are all well. I'm well. Are you well? Are you well?
Am I well? Yeah, I'm all right. You know, I'm a bit hot, but other than that, I'm all right.
Just a bit, mate. Just a bit. Well, I'm coming off this one today. For any of you, our beautiful listeners, and wherever you are in the country, we're based in Manchester. And today has been Scorchio in the northwest. And I'm recording this after a nice, decent session. So if I forget anything, I'm going to be putting it down to the corona, and I don't mean the virus.
That's the one. Fair play. Do you know what? Right, I had this really on my notes here. I had this really cheesy link lined up. So my link was: are you having a drink, Tom? What's your drink? What are you drinking? And this was
no. You know what? I'm not even going to follow the line now because it's just so obvious.
What's obvious? What am I drinking, Tom?
What are you drinking, Steve?
I'm drinking a cup of tea.
Wow. Where can we segue from the cup of tea? How do we segue out
I've got no idea, man. I'm actually... but the problem is, it's too hot for a cup of tea, so no one would bloody well believe it. I've actually got a Sailor Jerry and lemonade, which is amazing. But, so no cup of tea, but a Mr. T. Let's start with the Mr. T this week. How could we not start with the Mr. T?
What an absolutely incredible figure. And it was down to you. It was down to you that sort of introduced me to it, from the reveal that was made throughout the cryptic little messages over Instagram and Facebook this week, whether it be the first time in the line, the Coliseum video sticker, or it was the camouflage backdrop with the old school WWE logo. But what a corking figure on release from EntertainmentEarth.com. EntertainmentEarth.com got this official release of the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, first time in the line, Elite Collection Mr. T from Mattel. It is an absolute beauty of a figure. So after some coaxing from our very own Mr. T, Ayla, I made an order and you got two. Boom. We're in.
I did. Yes, I did. I got two. We were limited to one, but I managed to. Luckily, I've got an account set up in my name, and an account set up in the wife's name, and we got two. So, and what I really like about it, to be honest, is because I bought it. The majority of my Mattel stuff is Lucy. There's a couple of bits that I keep on card or in the box, but I thought I'm going to keep one. I'll keep one for the box, and I'll get one Lucy. And then when I properly saw it, you can display it in the box in that VHS style thing you've got going on.
That's the thing that sold it to me.
So
now,
cool.
I wasn't always a big T fan. I mean, growing up in the 80s and 90s, loved the A-Team, but the phrases were cool, were fun, but I was never all about the A-Team. I was all about Ghostbusters. So it was one of those, I was like, okay, shouldn't I? And I was sat on the fence. But I think that really did sell it to me was the packaging, because I do love so many retro things, and my man cave is decked out in 80s, 90s nostalgia. To have that with other VHSs that I have, it'd be amazing. So yes, I'm looking forward to introducing that into the collection. Absolutely. So when's the dispatch on that?
Do you know what? I've got no idea. I think it's July. But I don't really care as long as it comes. I'm not really bothered. But the thing is with it, when you look at it, it's not just the way it's packaged. The figure itself is phenomenal. And, I think it was, I don't know if it was Bill McKean, it was someone from Mattel, I'm pretty sure it was Bill, that had said, last year's Macho Man was incredible, but this year's beats it. And I think he made some comment along the lines of, the only concern is how we beat it next year. And so it's just one of those things, isn't it? It's like, instantly, me and a couple of other friends were talking about what it could be with the camo, and like, there were some people suggesting it was Kirshner. There's no way that Kirshner is going to beat Macho as a reveal.
No, absolutely not.
Even if they did, someone suggested an Adnan Mustafa double set. But again, yes, I'd quite like it for my WrestleMania 7 kind of SummerSlam 91 era stuff. But it isn't going to beat the Macho Man. It had to be Mr. T. And that was my comment, on the social media set, was it must be Mr. T and
if you look
Mr.
at the
T
pre-sales already from Entertainment Earth, it's sold out within 1 hour, and this is just on pre-order, so this isn't physical in hand. This is just a pre-order, and it's sold out within 1 hour. And you trace that back to what you were considering and what you were thinking about and what the reveal was going to be. Could you imagine with an hour within a pre-sale of going online, pre-orders selling out within an hour, that would not happen for an Adnan and a Mustafa? Can't see it.
No,
it definitely wouldn't happen for a Corporal Kirshner. So yeah, from a sales perspective, I'm sure they have pulled in a lot of interest in this figure. And going back to what you were saying in regards to how is Bill going to top it for next year? That was always the tagline of Vince McMahon for WrestleMania. So that could have been a clue. That was always the one. Obviously, Mr. T being very, very pivotal in WrestleMania 1 and then WrestleMania 2. The tagline for Vince McMahon every year, as soon as WrestleMania finishes, is how am I going to top that? So that might have been a nice little niche touch in there. So yeah, I didn't know that. There you go. There you go.
Maybe. See, I've not really followed the figure stuff for that long, really. So, you know, the Macho last year was my first.
Did you pick it up? Did you get it?
San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. No, I didn't get it. When I say it was my first, it was the first one that was released while I was collecting figures. Yeah. So I didn't get it. I didn't pick it up. I probably will at some point if I can get my hands on it. But again, you know, it's expensive, and you know, we're not WWE talents who can go and blast a few £100 or a couple of grand on a figure. Certainly not guys who get sent stuff in the post. Hint, hint, Mattel. You know, we could be your we could be your UK review guys. So yeah, I think. But you know, what was interesting is last year was not strictly a wrestling thing. Do you know what I mean? It was crossover, and this year, again, it's crossover. And do you know what I'd really love for next year's to be? I'd really love a Shep Ramsey.
A Shep Ramsey crossover. just a little bit of no holds barred.
It's not no holds barred. Suburban Commando.
Oh, Shep Ramsey was Suburban Commando. You see, making me look daft. Was it Rip Turner? Rip
yeah,
something
right.
was no holds barred.
I can't remember now. That's
yeah, Rip.
That's the one. So yeah. I think I would like a Suburban Commando Shep Ramsey. I think that'd be...
Yes, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Definitely. That was Christopher Lloyd as well in there.
It was, yeah. Brown, I think they could probably leave the Mr. Nanny thing alone. But...
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't be releasing Hogan in the pink suit.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter's literally been ballerinaing all week, and I just keep calling her Mr. Nanny, and she has no idea why. And my son just laughs, so it's great.
Super.
It's great. But yes, that'd be a great one, a nice little crossover. We love crossovers. So yes, going on the Mr. T theme. Let's see if Mattel want to do any crossovers. So talking about what we plan to do this week is what we have got lined up for you guys, which was a review of Netflix's very own The Toys That Made Us, looking at wrestling figures in general, and it was an interesting one. What did you think just off the bat, just as a standard review before we delve a little bit deeper into it? What was your...
Well, it's interesting because I watched it again, but obviously with different eyes. The first time I watched it, I've watched it probably 2 or 3 times. First time I watched it, it was, you know, let's have a see what they're talking about. Let's see what they're going to teach us. And then, obviously, watching it this time, I was watching it with more of a critical eye because, obviously, we're going to talk about it. What my overview thoughts were, it's probably not really aimed at any of our community. I think it didn't. I think there are very few things on it that would teach us anything. It was very much an overview. So, like, for example, if we go and watch, I don't know, if we watch the Star Trek episode, for example, which I don't collect, it's an overview for people who are not necessarily collectors of that particular thing. So I think, you know, there were things on there things that I thought should have been on there that weren't. But then when I looked at it, I kind of went, you know what? It's not actually aimed at me. It's probably aimed at, you know,
No, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. And it's nice that we do this fresh as well without sort of discussing it beforehand, because I found the same thing, because they are producing a show not tailored towards wrestling fans. They are producing a show tailored at toy fans and people who remember and are very nostalgic about their childhood and what brought them to the dance of adulthood, and what they still have in their lofts or in their attics or in their basements or wherever, and what led to it. So doing a brief overview on all sorts of different things, whether it be Hello Kitty or Lego, it doesn't delve in deep, which is something I would love to see more. But it does its job perfectly for what it was meant to do. And that was just give a brief overview and a brief history of the wrestling figure industry. For me personally, I thought that they focused a lot more on the history than on the current stuff. So literally with Mattel, they only spent 4 minutes on Mattel. Now, from a 45-minute show, I understand that sort of 10%, but it still wasn't enough for me. They spent a lot of time going over how they got the different contracts, whether it was Robbie Kanoff joining in with Saul, or whether it was David Galoob picking up the different contracts and then losing them out. And there was lots of different information like that that I found was intriguing, but I'm sure a lot of other people were like, well, show me the wrestling. You are
the only person on the planet that calls Robbie Kanoff.
It's Jewish lightning. He's Jewish lightning.
See, that's the figure they should release.
Oh yeah, spin that dreidel. He's here with his yarmulke on, rocking that party. What an absolute legend!
The thing
Robbie
is,
Kanoff.
He should be next year's Comic-Con exclusive. The thing is with
he should be the Comic-Con exclusive with an accessory of a shit in the bed, and not just anyone.
That's the one.
Hulk Hogan's. That's what. There's the crossover. That's the link.
One. But I think the thing is with it, the whole program, the whole series is nostalgic. So I can see why they didn't spend too much time on the new stuff. But yeah, I mean, I've got that written down. 4 minutes and 33 seconds from the end. Bear in mind they did a little summary of the whole thing at the end. So 4 minutes 33 seconds from the end is when they started to mention Mattel, which, you know, when you think about the fact that Mattel's had the license for 10 years, and
it's 10 years into 4 minutes, isn't it? And you look at Hasbro, who got the contract in 89, and they ran to like 94, so 5 years, and they must have spent at least a good 10 minutes on Hasbro.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, the thing is as well, I mean, you know, if we start at the beginning, it's interesting because Remco were supposed to originally have the contract for the WWF, and then Galoob could have had it, and then it ended up being LJN with some shifty, underhanded dealings. But I wonder if, and I'm assuming they would have done, if Remco got the gig, would they have just been that He-Man style thing with the different heads? I think it probably would have been, yeah.
It would have, absolutely. It would have been, because that was what Remco were known for. They were known for the knockoff toy brands. So from a basis of what they were producing, they were copies. The He-Man figures were the originals, and what Remco were putting out were just the copies of those, complete copies of those. So if you look at the AWA line, complete copies of those, and the figures are awful, absolutely awful. There is no comparison between what the LJNs came out. I mean, they are classed as dog toys, and the team were very, very, very happy to say that they were classed as dog toys. Big, heavy, clumpy rubber toys, 8 inches as well, because they didn't even get scaled down because they didn't have the time. They were presented as 2-ups and didn't even have the time to scale them down to the standard size. So they just went out. Which was crazy. But yeah, I am so glad that LJN did pick up that line, and there is a big difference from what they were offering and what actually went for. So I think they, having a look down my list here, so it was the handshake deal with Vince with Galoob originally was $10,000, and then Saul offered them $25,000, and the all in.
$10,000.
Sorry, Remco was $10,000. Galoob was 25,000 plus a dinner with Saul. That would have been a clincher for me. And then LJN came and swooped in with $200,000, which is 8 times Galoob's offer. So there's a massive difference. No, I bet Vince was walking out of that meeting grinning from ear to ear, because at that time $200,000 was a hell of a lot of money, knowing they just literally left something on the table that was, because
of course now $200,000 is pocket change, but you know, but back in those days, I mean, bear in mind he was considering Remco at 10 grand, so it and
a handshake deal at 10 grand.
Interesting, isn't it? But you see, then, so I mean, if we just step back a little bit, I wonder what Galoob would have done with that first line, because they were saying if we just kind of skip over a couple of bits, they were saying when they got the WCW thing, they had to get something out really quickly, so they ended up doing effectively LJN style single solid pieces, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I wonder if they would have created something maybe more articulated or something completely different to what the Galoobs that we know now look like. Do you know what I mean? I don't think from what they were saying, I don't think the WWF figures by Galoob, should they have got the gig, would have been what the WCW Galoobs became. I think they'd have been something a bit more refined. Seemingly, the WCW Galoobs are as they are because they had to be quick, and there was no time for making articulation. There was no time for anything. It was just quickly, let's make a solid toy and get it out. We've got to get something to market. So, but then you go LJN. They should have been Bendhams.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, they should have had all sorts of different wiring inside them to be able to be articulated in a bendable style, but didn't come out of it because they couldn't get the wiring to go into a figure that big to make it any kind of profitable, which was bananas that they signed off on the 8-inch. But hey ho, they were the first, and they were the first that a lot of us will remember collecting. Albeit, can you remember them being on sale over here?
Nope. So, but having said that, I mean, I
can't either, and I picked some up from car boot sales. I've picked up like an Iron Sheik and a Bret the Hitman Hart and an Adrian Adonis from car boots over here. So it's weird. Is it something that came before my time, that was on the shelves? Was it on select shelves? Now that's a question for you guys, for some of our older listeners. Do you ever remember LJNs being on sale over here for a general sale within the UK? Let us know in the comment section. Let us know if you did ever see them on store shelves over here in the UK. But I can't remember them. Steve can't remember them. The first things that we remember, obviously, were our beloved Hasbro's. So as we go from the LJN line, as we found out that Galoob lost it, Remco lost out, LJN picked it up, and then as LJN swooped out, and Canadian giants, well, I say Canadian giants, but Grand Toys picked up the final line, which are now beautifully entitled by our collecting community as the Black Card Wrestling Superstars 89 line, which included absolute corkers like the Honky Tonk Man, which were brilliant. A nice little selection at the end that LJN didn't produce. We didn't have those either, and they are very sought after products.
I was going to say, because I need a Black Card Hogan loose. So if anyone is listening and has one they want to sell, I will be interested in talking to you. But I certainly do not want to buy it on the card, because that would pay my mortgage for quite a while. But yeah.
Absolutely. Now, there is, just on a sidetrack, there was a show produced by a gentleman called Jordan called Toy Hunters.
Have you going to talk about the one with the guy from, was it the Black Eyed Peas that did it? Or, yeah. Taboo.
The Black Eyed Peas, Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas, that has the black card, Hogan mint on card.
Well, he bought it from Hogan's shop, didn't he? He said it was part of his personal collection. Right. I'm not sure if it actually was, but yeah, I mean.
By the look on Hogan's face, he didn't know what was going on, to be honest. He, and that's the case of, yeah, brother, it's from my personal collection. I have no idea what it is, but it's from my personal collection.
I kicked the bucket. It's worth 800 grand. That was his line. I'd have shot him there and then. So, you know, well, it's worth 800 grand now, pal. You know, I wouldn't really. Just a disclaimer. I would not. No violence is condoned.
Yes.
But yeah, I think. What would have been interesting, just stepping back actually, because we were talking at the top of the top of this section about how what we thought about the show, and you think about all the information that they must have. They must have collected. I mean, I know for a fact, they went to Zack Ryder's. They spent a lot of time with Ryder and stuff. You would have thought they would have got a lot of deeper information that us guys would have been interested in, and it's almost like probably for not a lot more money, they could create a director's cut where they go, right, this is the version that's going to go out to Netflix and whatever. And if you go to whatever, toysthatmadeus.com, here's the director's cut, and it's another half hour maybe on top of that where it talks about the different things. Because one thing that I would have liked to know more of, because having listened to the Major Wrestling Figure podcast and seen stuff on YouTube about certainly the Greg and the Hasbro unreleased stuff, I'm very interested to find out a lot more about unreleased stuff from further back, from LJN, from what
yes, from the LJN.
What did exactly, or what did Galoob have with the WCWs that they didn't release and things like that. So it would be interesting to find more of that out from the show. I bet they've got that information, and they did really quick. And I'm blinking, you miss it here, but there is a little bit where they go, and they just about had the articulated toys ready to go, and then there was something about toy guns that messed the company up. So and they lost the license. But there's an articulated Hogan, and they did show something else. I can't remember. I didn't make a note of what that the other toy was, but I'm pretty sure it showed a couple of articulated LJNs.
This was I think it was a Macho Man that was the other articulated figure. And the other thing as well that I didn't realise was that it had the really bouncy ring. That LJN had that really, really bouncy ring. It's just something that I just can't recall ever seen. And there were a few little bits in there, a few little Easter eggs of some unproduced lines, but they were so quick, it was like blink and you've missed it, just like you just mentioned. As we progressed through into the Jakks line, there was the 10-pack, which was the Family Divided pack, which is the only Jakks produced Linda McMahon figure. And the shot that they used, Vince McMahon doesn't have a head. So I did a little bit of research in this, and actually Brian Myers found the set in a particular collector's collection. It is a one of a kind, and Vince still doesn't have a head. So it was one of those. I would love to see more of those figures, more of those shots, and the stories behind them. So, and I'm sure it's the same case for every different brand that they've looked at, whether it be Lego or Star Wars or whoever, that they will have cutting room floor material that they could put an extra section. You
would have thought, but they could probably do that. That's it, and they could probably do that for every other. They could probably do that for every other one of those series. There's probably a load of things about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Star Trek, Star Wars, My Little Pony, whatever else they've done that real collectors would really want to know. But I would be really interested to know who they were going to produce in that line, and it's very interesting to think, isn't it, how the landscape might have changed if LJN would have then come out with the second line of figures. Would they have stopped with the big 8 inches completely, or would it run separately alongside it? Hasbro probably wouldn't. They certainly wouldn't have got the deal when they got it. Would they have got it further down the line? Would we have had Jakks? Would we have had Classic Superstars? Would we get Mattel now? So it's that almost that butterfly effect, isn't it? In terms of figures,
absolutely.
And I think, but
it's what could have been, what could have been, what could have been. Yeah, you just don't know. You just don't know. It is. And sometimes you look at your life that way. It's like, what if I hadn't have done that to that day, and what if I'd done this differently? So it is nice to reminisce and sort of fantasy book, as it were, what figures you would have had in the line from the next line if it had gone from the black card. If the Canadian company hadn't picked up on it, and LJN had produced the Honky Tonk Man range, which we now call the black card, what would have been in the next set? Did they make an Akeem? I don't think they made Akeem, did they?
LJN, no, they didn't. They made a one-man gang, but they didn't make an Akeem.
Yeah. So I would have thought with the obviously with as things progressed and we now found out that within Hasbro one that they had Akeem. I'd have thought they'd have had an Akeem and then flowing it down the line, a Dusty Rhodes. The thing that I did like about the LJN series was that they produced managers, which is something that Hasbro didn't do. So you could have had the classic Freddie Blassies and your slick figures. A slick figure would be amazing from the Mattel.
Wouldn't it just?
Jakks never made one.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Jakks never made one. Obviously, Hasbro never made one. So you are tracing things really, really far back. It had to have been 86, 87 that figure was produced by LJN. So it's been a long time since we've seen a slick figure. But as we did progress into the Hasbros, one of the things I did like transitioning through, one of the first things as we swapped from the LJN line to the Hasbro line were the toy commercials, the original toy commercials featuring people like Jesse Ventura and Rowdy Roddy Piper and the Macho King, the Demolition, that were included in that, because I always remember those from the beginning of the Coliseum video, the Silvervision Coliseum video releases. They always were played as like an intro, as like a trailer into the feature presentation, and I love them. I absolutely love them. It feels like being in the ring. Yeah, that was it was always the thing that I always
what I always thought was really bizarre about that is why Jesse Ventura was in those commercials, because he never got a figure, and I understand he was the commentator at the time, and there were no announcers or commentators that were doing it, but you would have just thought, surely that just muddies the waters a bit. You know, because to be fair, Jesse would be a great figure. You know, he would have been he'll probably end up being a fantasy figure one week. But, you know, what... I just don't understand why they put Jesse in the commercial for the Hasbros. He should have been, you know, it's pointless in my opinion, but there you go.
But I thought from my side, I mean, they'll have only had Jesse in for Series 1, I believe, because Jesse left halfway through 1990. Yeah. So he would have been around for the first series. They could have had visions that they were going to produce a Jesse further on down the line that got wiped out completely upon his release. And I'm sure there's lots of figures that all the companies would have planned to do if things didn't happen. And the things that have happened this week, I'm sure Mattel are scratching their heads, because I'm sure there's a lot of talent there that they're thinking, that figure's not getting produced now. Oh dear. But I love those commercials. They were very, very nostalgic for me. But as it did get through, it revealed that Hasbro didn't want to take the same line as LJN and produce the dog toys. They did want them to have movement. They did want that finesse for sculpting. They wanted the articulation, and they wanted to scale it down a little bit more, which is why they came to the 4.5 inch tall figures that we now know and love. So they peaked at $100 million, which included the ring, the belt, the minis, the talking Hogan. $100 million in their till from that first line of figures. How incredible!
Unbelievable. But I mean, let's face it, they are, in terms of playability, they are the best figures, without a doubt, in my opinion. They are incredible.
Yeah. Did you see as well from the wrestling buddies from Tonka? They made $30 million in the first year as well. They were a massive seller.
Have you got any?
And you know what? I don't. I never have ever had any of the wrestling buddies from Tonka. No. My friends did. Like neighbours and stuff, they had the Hogan and the Jake, and somebody even had both the LOD, because you got those as the 2-pack. But I never picked them up, and it's things that I've seen on eBay and selling sites. The thing that's sort of putting me off is when it comes down to because I'm a mint on card collector, it would need to be in the box, because what really puts me off is that some sweaty guy has been
cuddling it,
literally molesting Hogan. Yeah, and you buy it and it turns up and it's got stitch marks over the yellow trunks, and that would freak me out.
Yeah, it's funny because I've got it was really weird as a kid. I got the Ultimate Warrior for Christmas one year, and then we went into a toy shop, I don't know, later on in that year, and Hogan and Macho King were there. And I chose, weirdly enough, Macho King. I don't know why, but and it wasn't even it was never a regret. I think it was a case of, I think everyone I knew had Hogan. So it was a case of...
Right, so you wanted to be different. And it could have been that WrestleMania 7 thing.
Maybe
Warrior versus Savage.
Maybe I think it wasn't so much a case of being different. I think it was the fact that now I've got that one between us. We've got the collection because the original set where I think was just those three, and I've got to be honest, and don't ever remember seeing any others other than the Hogan, the Macho, and the Warrior. So I've got those two, my original ones, as from being a kid, and something for whatever reason I never threw them away. They always stayed. Just whatever in the attic or whatever, and they've recently been sort of Febrezed and brought into the collection.
How do they look? Have they gone very, very floppy, or were they floppy originally? Because, like I say, I remember being a neighbour's house and they had them, but it wasn't something that I ever sort of drifted towards. It was always the Hasbros. And from a comment that you made earlier on of having something that your friends didn't have to complete a set, that sort of sprung back into my mind because I used to get figures when we used to go to Toys R Us or Boydell's and Toy Master or whatever, and I used to buy figures that I knew for a fact that Next Door didn't have, so we could have those matches rather than buying the same one. So mad that literally just sprung back. So what are they like?
They are flat. Warrior is very flat, but I remember when I was in Cubs and I used to go camping, I used to take that with me as my pillow. So everyone in the tent would leg drop it or give it a flying elbow. We'd have a bit of a wrestling match, and then it became a pillow. So it is. That's really flat. Macho Man not so much, but then off eBay last year. For a really good price of about £24, I won a Hogan. It's a Lucy, so we got it and we threw it in. There were no weird stains or stitches on it, so that was all right. And we got it in the washing machine and Febrezed it up, and actually that's the fluffiest one of the lot. But and my little boy has it in his room, and weirdly enough, then I was at a toy fair, probably about probably the back end of last year, I think, and there was the NWO Hogan Buddy, so I picked that up for I think it was a tenner. So I brought that home, and for whatever reason, my daughter, who's like 4, Bad Guy Hogan is her thing. She loves it. I don't know why. So I walked through the door with it.
You need to be watching that, mate. You need to be watching that as she gets older.
And I
Bad boys.
I know that's the bad thing. So I walked in the door and she was just took it off me. And that was it. So we washed it and now that's in her bedroom. So I mean I bought them for collecting purposes, not for anything else. Not for the kids to use, but the kids do. They do use them, and I say use them. They have them in their little teddy stack at the end of the bed. So yeah, I mean I've got a friend who's I don't think he's got LOD, but he's got Macho Man, which is a really cool one, and I really want to get that. He's got Jake, he's got Boss Man, which again is another. I was always a big Boss Man fan, So I do want to get more, but they're so expensive. I mean, they're silly money, and you just kind of think, wow. When you get one at a bit of a bargain for £24 I paid for that Hogan, it's not a major issue, but
no, and you're fine with that. And how it comes, you'd be happy with it at that type of money. It's when you're spending over when you're looking at the 3-digit marks and they come and they aren't perfect. Correct. Then that's what gets my back up. And the thing is with me as well as from some of our early listeners will know, I'm a completist. So if I have one, it means then that I have to have the set. It's the way it goes, and we found that out this weekend with it being Father's Day on Sunday. Came downstairs to a nice little barrage of gifts from my children, my wife. Thank you very much for them, and they had all sorts of different things, whether it be pretty green clothing. But I opened the box, and in there, lit up like a Christmas tree, did my face when I pulled out Retrofest Mr. Perfect minting box. Loved it. Mr. Perfect, him and Shawn Michaels are my 2 ultimate favourites ever. So having that, the final Mr. Perfect that I didn't have from the Mattel line in my collection was brilliant. Now, I had a Honky Tonk Man because the Entertainer are currently selling them at £6.66, so of course I managed to pick one of those up. Now, having 2, that means I had to get the other 5. So literally, with it on my knee, the phone gets pulled out and I order the Ric Flair and the Hacksaw Jim Duggan, knowing that I have to get all 7. So it's crazy. But they are amazing figures. And to display, they are...
Yeah, they do look
cool.
If
any of you guys listening have got the Retrofest, let us know which ones you've managed to pick up.
Indeed. So going back to toys that made us then. So because otherwise, you see, we're 35 minutes into a podcast here, and what's going to end up happening is we're going to dedicate 4 minutes 33 seconds to Mattel if we're not careful. So interestingly, so we to be fair, we've done a whole sort of there's loads of stuff covering Hasbro's. So we know about Hasbro's. We won't go into them. We will talk at some point about things that we think should have been produced and stuff. But this isn't about the toy line. This is about the show. And I think they kind of they probably should have in the Hasbro section done a little bit about the unreleased stuff. And it would have been really good if they could really delve into finding some drawings of things that just nobody knows. If there were any managers, or if there were people from the
that'd have been amazing, wouldn't it? That'd have been amazing. Yeah, I'd have loved to have seen. That.
I'd
love to have seen.
Or even
and plus as well.
I was going to say even if there were some of the Ron Rudat drawings or whoever's drawings of maybe alternate. Original ideas. So we've got the original Shawn, the heel Shawn that should have had the sort of Jake the Snake style punch rather than the Macho Man kind of body. I wonder how many other figures were originally destined for another body or another action. I would love to have known that. Yeah, because that doesn't really get covered that much. There's a lot of unreleased figure stuff that gets talked about, but actually, how many versions, how many drafts of Hogan and Akeem and Big Boss Man, whatever, were there before they actually arrived at what they were going to actually put out. But but also
I'd love to have seen that.
But it's something we don't really know that much about. So but again, they're not making the show for us, are they? Like I say, they're making the show for people who are just have a general interest in nostalgia. Really, that's the kind of thing it is, because that's what drew me to it. Anyway, I'm not actually, other than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Simpsons, I'm not really a collector of anything else. I don't do Ghostbusters. I don't do, I never did Mask as a kid or Thundercats or any of that. So,
you know what I've just started on as well? I've just started on Beetlejuice, Kenner's Beetlejuice figures. These are incredible. I remember having them as a kid, and I've just managed to pick a couple up from eBay. Amazing. How they got away with some of the things like exploding body parts for children and having breathable lungs within a figure. Just incredible. You wouldn't get away with it. You wouldn't now. So yeah, I've just started on the Beetlejuice line. So yeah, that's now something else that I need to complete.
Well, there you go. I think at some point there are going to be some spin-offs of this show, because there's so many other things that get collected. But one thing that I would, I've got sort of written down here is what is about the Galoobs. The weird thing is about the Galoobs. I've just started collecting them. I've got about 9 or 10. I think this week I had a delivery of Blue Trunks Ric Flair, which I actually think is a really good Ric Flair figure.
Yeah, I always had that. I had that because it's the light powder blue trunks, isn't it? Which I used to love, because that was one of the original attires that he appeared in the WWF with. In fact, he had a match against Shawn Michaels when he was in the Rockers, and that was the only Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair match until very much later on in their career, 2003. So that figure was like the ultimate for me, and I always used to replay that match. Rocker Shawn against Galoob Blue Pants Ric Flair. So yes, love that.
So yeah, I got this week. I got Ric Flair, Michael Hayes, and do indeed. Yeah, apparently he never says that, but there you go. And El Gigante. They arrived this week for my Galoob collection, but it would have been interesting to find out what else they had in the pipeline before, because it didn't really say much about how they lost it. It didn't say, because I can't imagine, and I haven't done that much research on it, but we will probably, I will do, and we'll talk more about it as we go forward. But I believe there was a repaint series. So the Series 1, and then they repainted Series 1 and re-released it, and then there was some UK stuff that came out, and I think maybe it just didn't sell, because, you know...
So there was one that I was always that always sort of interested me from the Galoob line, and it was the Ric Flair repaint, where he's got like maroon shorts with a lightning bolt on it. Have you seen that figure?
I certainly have.
Yeah. Now, Ric Flair never wore those shorts. So why produce that figure?
That's a very good point, yeah, because he wasn't exactly into fancy pants, was he? So, yeah.
No, you know what it could have been? It could have been, before he was released, Jim Herd wanted to turn Ric Flair into Spartacus. Ric Flair was going to get rebranded. Can you imagine rebranding the Nature Boy? And they wanted to strip him down, they wanted to cut his hair, and they wanted to make him Spartacus. So it could be that figure was produced ahead of the reveal that he was going to be Spartacus. And at that time is when he packed his bags and left and went up north. So it could be, that could have been a vision for what could have been.
That's very interesting. And there's some knowledge for you that I did not know. You learn something new every day. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see who else they, because by the time those figures were knocking about, because there was a couple of people on there that said, I think, because Zombie Sailor's on there, isn't he? And he was saying that he didn't see them in Toys R Us or anything, the Galoobs, but I do. I remember there being quite a lot of Galoob stuff in the UK. Certainly in the toy shops I used to go in Toys R Us and Hardcastles, which was like our local independent. There was a place called Toy and Hobby. I don't know if you remember Toy and Hobby from years ago. Those kind of places were they were full of Galoob stuff. I mean, I didn't collect it. I didn't watch it. I thought it was boring. I thought the product was bland. I thought in terms of what they were delivering on the TV, and I thought the actual. At the time, I thought the product, as in the figure product, was also a bit pap. But looking back at it now, it's phenomenal. And I think for example, the Sting figures. One of the guys from Fully Posable podcast said that they still think that that's one of the best Sting figures, and I've got to be honest, I massively agree. I think it's such an iconic Sting figure, and to say they quote unquote rush release these things, I thought actually the faces on some of them weren't that bad. I think the face on the Flair is probably better than the face on the Hasbro. So for me, the Hasbro, which was an iconic figure, for more reasons than one, but it was the face that Flair's pulling, because he just looks so constipated within that particular figure print. I completely agree that Galoob produced a better figure for Ric Flair's facial features, definitely. And some of the other ones were really, really good as well. I loved the Sid Vicious figure. I thought that they cracked the mullet perfectly. I thought they did an amazing job of the Elegante figure. I thought they smashed that out of the park. The Doom collection as well, the Butch Reed and the Ron Simmons, was brilliant. So they did a really good job to say that they rushed them. And as you got further into the documentary, finding out that that David Galoob was asked to step down from his own company ultimately, and ultimately lost the WCW license. When they did pick up the WCW license again as the original San Francisco toy makers, they started producing figures that were crap. Basically, they were the worst looking figures ever, and that was the thing for me as well. The Galoobs that they did produce, I thought were good. They were all right. They fit very nicely in terms of the size, and they matched up against the Hasbros. What would it have been like if we'd have had the size of figures that they released in the 90s from the original San Francisco toy line earlier on? If they were our Hasbros, if they were our LJNs, I think that they'd have been awful. They would have been awful, because they did. That's what David Galoob wanted. He wanted to make sure that there was a lot of articulation within his figures, and they just really fell off the cliff. They were horrendous figures, horrendous. And how Ted Turner signed off on them as well, because the likeness was just ridiculous. The likeness on all the figures looked like somebody completely different than what they were meant to. The fact that you've just got a giant and a Paul White figure, the only defining feature that he's got long hair and a goatee. That is it. That is the only thing that makes it look like the giant. Nothing else in that figure resembles him at all. So imagine being that particular superstar and waiting and thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have my own wrestling figure one day and it's going to look amazing. And then someone walks up to you with that. Mind you, that someone was probably Jewish Lightning. So, quite possibly. That's it.
In fairness, you're fine. Shit in his bed, you're all right.
Next year's Comic-Con exclusive himself. But see, so I was well out by then. By that time, I was out of wrestling. I was out of figures. I was not watching the product. Did you watch shall we call it, revamped WCW, sort of Nitro stuff? Were you still just a WWF guy at that point?
Oh no! I was all in for WCW. I was all in, and it was the case in the UK where we had Cartoon Network, and then Cartoon Network became TNT at 9 o'clock at night on a Friday. That's what it did. It swapped from being one channel to being a completely different channel, and the first show on TNT was Nitro. So every Friday night here in the UK, we had Raw on one side and Nitro on the other side. And my parents they lived downstairs and did their life downstairs. I had my own TV in my room, which was hooked up to the Skybox downstairs.
Yeah.
The only thing was I couldn't change the channel while in my room. So I literally had to run down the stairs with the remote in hand, change the channel, and then run back upstairs again, and kept doing that every like, if it was a match I didn't like, I'll swap back down, I'm going to go and turn Nitro on. Yeah, this is perfect. I'll sit and watch this for a minute. Okay, that's brilliant. Right, I don't want to see Scott Putski anymore. Right, I'm running back upstairs. Bang, 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 bang. And it was a consistent thing, and that was Friday nights. That was like 96, 97. That was my Friday nights. When I was like 13. And I love that. And I have such fond memories of that. And I have some old VHSs because obviously it's not like now where you can record everything so amazingly and instantly. I had everything tuned up, and it like flip-flats how I flip-flatted because you basically recorded what you were watching. So yeah, I was a big Nitro fan, big Nitro mark. Had all my NWO merchandise and paraphernalia and T-shirt, and everything was Too Sweet and Too Sweet everybody. Literally, when we went on holiday to America, and one person clocked my NWO shirt, that was it. I was Too Sweet in everybody. Brilliant. Yes, well into the WCW brand. And in fairness, the WCW brand in 97 was miles better than the WWF's product. Miles better, without a shadow of a doubt.
I would have felt like I was supporting Man City. That's
what it did. That's what it felt like, and you feel dirty watching the product, watching the other person's product. You do. It's what you feel like. But it was so good that it had your head turned. And in fairness, it's flowed that way for me now with WWE and AEW. Because I am getting more and more turned off from the WWE program. My son watches it; he loves it, and he's always running downstairs telling me spoilers and storylines, and that's fine. But I am much more in tune with the AEW products, and I think it's on the basis that it's not oversaturated. That's the thing with me with the WWE and being a completist. I like to be able to watch everything within a brand. You've got Raw, which is 3 hours. Then you've got SmackDown, which is 2 hours. You've got Main Event, which is an hour. You've got NXT, which is 2 hours. NXT UK, which is an hour. 205 Live, which is an hour. So you've got, and that is not including any other exclusives or the pre-shows or the pay-per-views or anything else that the WWE do within their network. For me, that is too much content to digest in a week. And I think because they have to produce so much content, I think the quality of the content has seriously been affected. Whereas with AEW, they just have a 2-hour Dynamite and then an hour-long YouTube AEW Dark show. So they produce like 3.5 hours per week. That is digestible. I can go through that, follow the storylines. The storylines are very old school, which are amazing, including talent from all over the world, which I love. So I have swayed towards AEW. So again, feeling dirty, which is what I did in the 90s by swaying from my beloved WWF into the WCW days. But going into the toy line aspect of it, these guys should have been working with far, far superior toy makers. Not to say that Robbie and David and Saul were poor toy makers, but this line that they brought out of the WCW figures were unbelievably poor. They were rubbish. Really bad. It's
a bit bizarre, isn't it? Because if you look at it, if you look at big toy brands, Hasbro are a big toy brand. So with Hasbro having had the WWF license, I find it really weird that it wasn't until 2010 that Mattel got involved. People like Mattel or maybe Hasbro again should have been involved at that level. To have these kind of little independence guys, and Jakks taking over the WWF line, it's almost bizarre. I mean, these are
it is bizarre.
Big
the
brands.
thing is that I remember from reading and doing some research is that on the basis of Mattel didn't acquire the contract until WWE became PC. And it became PG rated because of all the investors and all the other different things that Mattel own within their brand. They didn't want to be associated with a TV-14 product. So that's why they didn't pick up the WWE brand prior to 2010, because they were still classed as a PG-13
Interesting.
Product. So, yeah,
interesting.
There you go.
Because the other thing as well, and we're going to have to probably go over our limit here, because we're going to give Mattel 4 minutes and 33 seconds if we're not careful. But the thing is, with Jakks, what it didn't really delve into as well is just how many lines Jakks had. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the first time, we then had, when Jakks took the WWE sort of the contract on for the contract for the WWE stuff, spit my words out, they developed different lines. So they had the classic superstar stuff, which apparently was a bit shit when it started. It was, according to one of the guys on there, the limbs were all a bit crap, but they sorted it out. But then they had all the other lines that we spoke about the other week when we talked about your collecting. So but they went down the ruthless aggression line, and they had all that kind of stuff. They had the stomp, all that kind of stuff going on. They didn't really mention any of that. They literally with Jakks went, oh, and here's Jakks, and Jakks did classic superstars, not classic superstars. Sorry, they did the
bone crunching action, and then we fixed
the BCA,
that, and then we did R3. Then we found our niche in the classic superstars line, and then we lost the brand. That was basically it for Jakks. The thing that they did as well that they didn't mention at all, seeing as we're in that time period, was the Just Toys Bend-Ems. They didn't mention them at all. Completely skipped over.
Bizarre. And the thing is as well with this Toys That Made Us thing for Netflix is they technically should be able to make it whatever time they want to make it in terms of how long the program is. They've not got a time limit. They've not got adverts and Coronation Street's on in a minute, so we've got to finish.
They've not got to fit it and wrap it around a 60-minute time slot with that. Exactly. So they could have produced a lot more. Now, what I think that we do is I don't think that we do a Toys That Made Us and give Mattel just 4 minutes. I think that we pick up where we leave off today in next week's show and discuss Mattel a little bit more in depth, and what we like, what we saw within the show, what we'd like to have seen within the show, and give it that little extra flavour that it really, really deserves. We want to add more sizzle to that Mattel steak.
Indeed.
What do you think? Shall we do that?
Absolutely. Let's do next week. So it's a two-parter. Next week we're going to talk a little bit more about Jakks, because we need to give Jakks, and I actually confused the classic superstars and the BCA's line before, but I think the classic superstars needs talking about more than it got on that show, and I think also that we need to talk a little bit more about Mattel. So let's do that now. In this last section, then, before we move on to, I'll let you go, and we'll come back next week with the other stuff. Let's do our two recurring sections, our two recurring items, our hit and miss. So. Yes. Let's have a look. I think I did the miss last week. So I will do for this week. I will do a hit, and my hit this week is weirdly enough, the Jakks Classic Superstars Haku. Yes, the Classic Superstars Haku. Now, are we talking about the Haku or are we talking about the Meng? We're definitely talking about the Haku for sure. Yeah, I think that for whatever reason, I've got it. I think we've probably mentioned it in one of the other pods, but I've got it just because I've always really wanted a Haku, and I know that we spoke about. In fact, that was it. We spoke about it last week, and it was your fantasy figure. But for me, it's kind of. It is a bit of a fantasy figure. It's a figure that I think we should have had, and that only Jakks Classic Superstars made a WWF Haku in that style. Did he get an LJN Haku?
Yes, there was an LJ and Haku. Now, I can't remember, and you guys could help me out, but did they make a Tonga Kid as well? I think they did, the Islanders, within the LJN team. I definitely know they did the Haku.
Interesting, that's a good point.
So
yeah,
that was another one that I'd love to have had within the Hasbro line.
So, yeah, well, that's exactly it, and I've got it on. I've got the Haku on display on my little misc shelf because it's the only classic superstar that I have on display that is Lucy. But it is a really, really cool. I think the head scan's phenomenal. Actually, I think it's a really good head scan. So for me,
he's got his mouth open, hasn't he? He looks terrifying.
My hit this week is classic superstars Haku.
Brilliant. Well, working on that basis, then, if I'm doing the miss, I want to stick with the classic superstars line. And the one
there's a few misses. Go on.
There's a few, but for me, collecting them, I started picking them up again, and a couple are from Series 1, a couple more from Series 2, progressed loads more into Series 3, got 4 from the Series 3 line, and then as we got into Series 4, I believe, I picked them all up. But in Series 4, they released a Brutus the Barber Beefcake figure, and I was really, really high on it. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for this figure to come out because they hadn't mentioned Brutus in years and years and years. And I thought this might be a sign that they were going to bring Brutus back for something. He'd signed a new Legends deal. He was going to do this and that with the company, and it never materialized. But we did get a Brutus figure from Classic Superstars Series 4, and it was awful. In fact, it was Series 5, and it was awful. The head scan on it was utterly terrible. And yeah, I worked it back, and Hasbro produced a really good Brutus. I was very, very happy with the original, the Jumper Brutus, and I was even more happy with the release of the Zebra Pants Brutus. But this one was just so bad. It was just so bad. The head looked horrendous. It didn't accentuate anything. The mullet was just too far of a flat top. It was a really poor figure. I waited and waited and waited for the Mattel line to bring out a Brutus, and I feel that the first one that they released was a good figure. That was the Zebra Pants, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
But the one that they did with the WrestleMania 9, the Mega Maniacs, I thought that was a poor figure as well.
Yeah.
So they went from good to bad to good to bad. So that was mine. That was my miss of the week. Was Brutus the Barber Beefcake's Classic Superstars Series 5.
Interesting. So nipping on to our second segment of the week, the fantasy figure. Now, the fantasy figure weirdly enough, we've actually already discussed my fantasy figure. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this a couple of weeks ago to say it's something I would really love because I'm a big Hogan mark, and I've got a decent sized Hogan collection going on. One of the things that I would absolutely love to put in my Hogan collection is a Shep Ramsey. So I would love to see. I would love to see as my fantasy figure an elite or an ultimate edition Shep Ramsey.
Do you have a Thunderlips?
I don't, as yet. I will be having.
That's a weird question that I didn't think I was going to ask a fella. Have you got Thunderlips? But
that's the one.
It is Thursday. It's Wednesday night. You see, I'm getting ahead of myself.
The thing is with it, you see, is I think that because wrestling, it's a popular culture thing, isn't it? It is. If you're into wrestling, if you're into actually just the sport, the entertainment, the pro wrestlingness of the whole situation, then there's something there for you. But if you are, if you're into nostalgia, if you're into stuff from the 80s, if you're into 80s film but not wrestling, and there's so much crossover. It's like I was saying before about that Mr. T character, or the Mr. T figure, should I say? It's the same again with this Shep Ramsey. I just think that doing a Suburban Commando in all the proper gear would just look really, really, really cool. So that's my fantasy figure of the week is a Suburban Commando.
That would be awesome. Now, seeing as we're talking about a crossover line, the thing that I've been thinking about this week is all the different WrestleMania main events. And the one that I would have loved to have seen was a Lawrence Taylor. Speaking of Mr. Taylors, Lawrence Taylor headlined WrestleMania 11. Being here in the UK, we had no idea who he was. He was an American football player. But he was one of those. There was just such a big build-up. And me being like 10, 11 at that time, it was like, oh, who's this guy? He's going to be the next big thing. And this is that. And that's the other. And yes, amazing. So I always wanted a Lawrence Taylor figure to fight against Bam Bam Bigelow. It's what you want when you're 10 years old. It's, you want to portray what's on screen. So I would have loved to have seen a Hasbro Lawrence Taylor. This was before the Jakks got the line, so prior to 96. Forgot all about him by the time 96 came along. But at the start of 1995, I'd have loved an LT figure. That would have been epic for a nice little Hasbro crossover, because there wasn't any others. We didn't get Zeus, which is another one that I don't want to mention now because it'll probably be on my list next week. I always wanted a Zeus as well.
That's the thing. So I think I was about to ask you a question. You kind of answered it, but so if Mattel were to make it now, you would have that Lawrence Taylor as a retro, not as an elite, would you? Or would you have it as an elite?
Because I didn't have a Bam Bam from Jakks until much later down the line within the Classic Superstars line, I originally wanted it as a Hasbro. To be produced now, I'd be more than happy for it to be a standard Elite Collection figure. I'd be more than happy for that. In terms of the retro line, unless
you won't bloody get
they
one.
Did.
Yeah.
But no, well, you wouldn't get one now unless Jeremy's got something in the line that we don't know. But to have a celebrity line now, that'd be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool on a Hasbro scale. Maybe that's something to look into, because they don't necessarily have to get the WWE license to produce those particular figures.
Not necessarily, no. And I'm just going to make a little note here of a new section next week.
New section.
Celebrity figure of the week. So here we go, guys. If you're going to comment on either on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel, just to let you know as well, what we're doing a really, really soft launch with this. We're not going Spotify or anywhere like that yet, just because we want to make sure that we can commit to doing it absolutely every week. We want to make sure that we can commit to days. So we started on a Monday, then we did Tuesday last week, and now it's Wednesday evening and we're making this thing. So the reason that we haven't gone all out yet is because we just want to make sure that we can commit to times and we can commit to days and we can commit to the weekly thing. But so for now we are just Facebook and YouTube. But if you do have comments, put them on there, on Facebook, on YouTube. If you were doing a celebrity figure line, who would you like to see in the celeb figure line, and why they haven't done that? Do you know what, Tom? You know, it's like you say, they don't even really need the license from the WWE. Surely they could just
you could make a Cyndi Lauper. Cyndi Lauper wore all the ties that she wore in the music videos was what she wore when she came to the ring. So I'm sure that they could utilize that. And another thing,
can you imagine?
I mean, without swaying away from it, is one of the things that I didn't like from the Hasbro line was the cards when they had an in-action shot of the particular superstar. I didn't like that. I always liked a studio shoot figure, studio shoot picture on the card. So you could have studio shot celebrities on card. They don't have to be shown in a ring at all.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I would love that. Let's delve into that a little bit more. But let us know, listeners. Let us know what we can do and what you would like to see from a celebrity line. As Steve said, we're just ironing out the crinkles, finding our rhythm, finding our flow. Let us know what you think of the show up to now. We are finding the right days that we're going to record on. Obviously, with us being down in lockdown, it has become a little bit more different. Trying to align children and homeschooling and all the other different bits and bobs that we do, as well as different relevant bits of work that we are continuing to do through lockdown. It's just trying to find the right time, the right day, and getting your product that is consistent out to you. So it will come as we progress, and obviously as kids do start returning to school, probably in September, we will get into a full swing of things. But we are doing a nice soft launch.
Indeed, and when we dig onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts, etc., all of the back episodes will be on there, which would be the idea as well. Though is as we get new fans or new listeners, they will be able to go back, listen to the earlier ones, and go all the way through and catch up and that kind of thing. So there'll be a nice back catalogue to listen to. So like Tom just said, it is literally about finding the rhythm, making sure you fine tweaking the things that work. For example, this week we're going to review the entire of the Toys That Made Us. We absolutely adamant on sticking to an hour because we think it needs to be nice and easily digestible, and because there are other podcasts that people are listening to. If you're listening to a 2-hour podcast and a 3-hour podcast, and then we come along with another 2 or 3 hour podcast, it's just going to be too much. So the idea is it's a nice, quick, easy digestible on the way to work, on the way from work in one day. You can absorb the entire podcast. But we ended up running out of time. So next week we're going to continue talking about Jakks and Mattel and how they should have been covered better in the Toys That Made Us. But until next week, guys, it's bye from me, it's bye from Tom, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.